right now. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Mythic Table Town Hall for June 2021. So we have a lot of exciting things to cover today, so we're going to jump right into it. So let's see now. Okay. So this, like I said, is the Mythic Table Town Hall for 2021. Our agenda today is go through some announcements, through some kudos. We've got some updates from several team members, and then we're just going to do the basic thing. We'll cover what you can do to help and what we can do to help you. So first off, I'd like to personally thank Linda, Sarah, Barry. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong side. First of all, our announcements. Okay. Welcome to Ryan and Pat. We've got two new developers that are joining us this month or this past month. Ryan's gone through his onboarding already, and he's already been pretty eager on helping us improve a couple of things. And Pat's going to be helping us out with some DevOps and server work. And I'm pretty excited about that because that takes pressure off me. So last month, we also made our Kickstarter goals, which is incredibly exciting. So a lot of this town hall is going to be talking about the Kickstarter goals, what we're going to do with the money and things like that. So by the end of this video, you're going to be pretty sick of us talking about that. But moving right along, I'd like to thank Linda, Sarah, Barry, and Lucas for all their hard work on preparing and executing on the Kickstarter. It was the first time Mythic Table has run a Kickstarter. It's the first time any of us have tried to run a Kickstarter. And there's a lot to it. It's a lot of work that has to go into that. And I feel like if I had to do this alone, it would not have done nearly as well as it has done. So thank you guys very much for that. Also like to thank Logan and Keith for becoming Mythic Table's first official contractors. So after the Kickstarter ended, we had a lump of funds that we could put towards contracting to try to meet our goals that we had committed to. And Logan and Keith have volunteered to take on those contracts. So Logan's going to be working full-time and Keith's going to be working part-time. Both of these guys are pretty fresh out of school, and you know, they've been working on Mythic Table for over a year combined, and they've been doing some great work. So we're pretty excited to be having them. So for our updates, Kickstarter, like I said, complete. It's been paid out. The money's in the bank, and we're starting to work on the contracts. So full-time development has been underway for what, Logan, about 2 weeks now, right?
Just wrapped up the second week, yes.
Right. And we've been finishing off the last of the grid experience work. And it's been nice to have that little extra time and effort to put into it to give it the polish that it really needs. This has been quite a lot of work to get this done. And we're pretty excited to be probably days away from releasing this publicly. And we already have a release in our testing environment right now. And we have QA people working on it. So we have almost 20,000 unique player accounts since we launched this title. I believe in the last month or two, it's gone up about 6,000 or 7,000. So I think this has a lot to do with people trying out Mythic Table because of the Kickstarter. And that's exciting. That's really exciting for us. We have 9 new patrons. And patrons are still pretty important to us, even though we've had this pretty successful Kickstarter. Patrons right now are able to support our infrastructure cost. And that is incredibly important. We're looking at bringing down the cost of our infrastructure. But for the time being, it's nice to have the patrons in there helping out in that regard. So thank you for that. So I'd like to hand it off to Logan now, actually. He's going to go through our development updates and tell you guys what we've been up to.
All right, great. So as Mark was talking about, we have been working really hard on getting this grid finder experience. I believe we talked about it last time. And now, like I said, he said. We're in the final phases of getting it actually out. It's currently in our quality assessment to make sure that we're not sending out something super broken and buggy as much as possible. So what this will allow you to do is quickly retool your grid without having to do any cropping or any extra work outside of just importing your map, finding the grid, and just clicking to make it happen. You can also make it so that your grid is not visible in case you have an overworld map or it already has the grid lines drawn onto it. And you don't need our extra little details to help the players see that. Additionally, token snapping can now be toggled on and off. And there are some zoom improvements so that you can actually get really tight in there no matter what size your map is once you have the grid kind of calibrated to that size. So Mark, if you want to go ahead and let me share for a moment, I'll go ahead and walk them through what exactly I'm talking about.
Sure,
All
absolutely.
right. Oh no, you have it disabled.
Oh, well, I can fix that super quick. I hope super quick. All
Pause
right,
for
give that
technical
a shot.
difficulties. Okay, great. So here we go. All right, cool. So we have our standard Mythic table in the background here. So you'll now find that in our header, you can go ahead and go over into the grid. So you'll now have, when things are active, this bright orange color to be able to find it. So right now this will be if the grid is shown, snap to grid, and then the grid finder mode. So let's go ahead and flip that on real quick. If you ever need a refresher of how it works, you can pop up the tutorial right there. And it'll pop up with a nice border around the edge so that you can make sure to find it easily. So let's go ahead and take this out for a spin. So what we effectively want to do is just kind of click on corners here. So we're just going to click here, click here. Oh, there's our grid. It's not quite where we want it. So if we start going further away, it'll start further correcting, and boom, in about, what, 10 seconds, we have our grid laid out. And this can offset itself. So if you don't have this perfectly lined up like this image, it'll offset itself and make all that work. Then we can just turn that off and you're ready to go. And then we were saying, if you don't want those, you can go ahead and turn off the grid shown, and you can have your tokens snap to or not, depending on your personal preferences. And that is the Grid Finder mode update.
Fantastic. Thank you, Logan. Let's take a look here. I am going to go back over to the presentation real quick. And how would you like to talk about what we're doing next, Logan?
Great. So we've been evaluating the Kickstarter goals and trying to figure out our kind of battle plan for getting started with all this. And we know that one of the really big, really cool, big asks is the fog of war. So we want to make sure that we take the time to do this right. So we're starting it bright and early, and we are starting to talk and look into designs. We're starting to do like our first technical forays into what it could possibly be. So currently it's a lot of hemming and hawing and seeing what might actually be able to stick to the wall. But we're really committed to staying flexible and really serving what we think will help Mythic Table, as well as from the feedback from you all. And on top of our Kickstarter goals going from there, we are also looking into doing other improvements that we've heard about, such as interacting with the chat, kind of going into more of a paging system, and making it a little bit easier for you to navigate the vast amounts of text that might be present in your chat.
That's right. And one final point is I've thrown a link there, and you'll be able to find this hopefully in our description of this video. And that link there is going to take you to an epic that we use to organize all the work that we'll be doing to meet our Kickstarter goals. So this is all publicly available. All the user stories, all of the work tickets that we have set up for this are going to be there. So you can track our work as we are making progress towards our Kickstarter goals. All right. Next up is design. Now, Lucas is running our design team as well as our UI and art teams right now, and he's pretty busy, as well as a full-time job and going to school and moving apartments and all kinds of other stuff. So we can't make it today. So I'm just going to talk really briefly about design and Mythic Table and what we're going to be doing. So As we're approaching some full-time development, it's really important that we have a lot of design worked out kind of ahead of time. This will allow Logan to be able to hit the ground running and be able to make a lot of really great changes. So we're ramping up how we're going to be doing design. We're going to be doing more meetings more frequently. We're going to be digging into a lot of the really nitty gritty details about how things are going to work. As we do this, we're going to be putting those details into those tickets that I talked about earlier. So if you're interested, you can kind of follow that by watching those tickets and seeing what we're doing. And you can even feed back into that by putting your own comments into those tickets. So this is pretty exciting. But we do have lots to do, but we're really eager to get started on it.
And we have a new designer who started contributing, Nestor.
That's correct.
He just helped us out with the Grid Finder experience, and that was his first design that I'm aware of.
That is correct. That is correct. So that is it for the updates. Let's see. Let's talk about what you can do now to help out Mythic Table. Now, everybody has been incredibly helpful for this project. Like, I can't believe how awesome the community has been. We reached over $31,000 for our first Kickstarter. That's incredible. And we have our Patreons, which are supporting us, to up to $500, $600 a month, which is really, really great. And the team is made up of the community. I mean, all of the developers are just programmers, artists, community support people who have just wandered in and they're, yeah, I think I want to help out. So this project is really being built by you. So how can we help push this forward? Well, they can spread the word. We still have very, very low, what's the word I'm looking for? Exposure. We have very low exposure. We don't have great marketing budgets. We're not doing any advertising or anything like that. So everything's word of mouth. So tell your friends about this. Tell them to check us out. And if they like what they see, tell them to pop us a line, jump on Discord and say hi. The other thing is, if you're interested, we have a lot of work to do. We could use all kinds of people in our development team. That includes quality assurance testers, programmers, DevOps, anything. We can use production support people, community support people, anything at all. If you make maps, jump on our Discord, say hi. Maybe we can use something you got. So anything at all. So what can we do to help? At this point, I open the floor for any kinds of suggestions, any kind of comments, questions, or things like that. So before I go into the list that I have here that I've gathered from the community over the last month or so, does anybody on the call have any questions or comments or anything?
Given the number of new people, Mark, how can they get in contact and kind of see what this project is?
That's a really great question, Logan. So I don't know how to answer this one. And the reason I say that is because I think that this is one of the areas that we've kind of failed at. And when I say failed, I'm not saying that we failed and it's unrecoverable. It's just that we're not doing as well as I would have hoped we could have done. We have areas that we can improve. So if you want to work on Mythic Table, if you're interested in learning about the technology that we're using and things like that, we're open source. You can jump into the project, pull down the code, and play with it. We've had some people with a little bit of success with this, but we've had more people that have come up with questions or hit roadblocks. So we need to improve our process of documenting how to do things, and we need to make our process simpler. We need to make it so it's really, really, really easy for people to just jump in and get the project running. If you want to learn about Mythic Table, that's another thing entirely, because Mythic Table is a living project. It's changing all the time. We had a roadmap that was published 6 months ago, 7 months ago. And this was published due to a lot of pressure that we've been getting about people asking, oh, what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about this? What is Mythic Table going to be in the long run? So we put out this roadmap saying, okay, this is what we think we can do. Now it's been out there for 6 months. Things have changed on the production side of things, on the development side of things, but they haven't changed on that roadmap. So
Mark,
yes.
we have a question already.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Is Mythic Table ready for DMs to build campaigns in play?
Yes, absolutely it is. We have tons of people that use it right now. I use it for one of my games. It's simple, but it can do multiple maps. It can do multiple tokens. It can do token sizes. It can do chat, dice rolling, things like that. And as we develop more and more features, the capabilities are getting bigger and bigger, and we're adding much, much more to it. So yes, absolutely, you can play it now.
Okay, one more question. 5e may be the most popular, so what's the suggestion for character sheets?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
So this has come up quite a few times, actually. In fact, I understand that this question came up in the last town hall before I was present, or while I was struggling with my audio. Character sheets are going to be a really interesting thing for Mythic Table. Number one, they're extremely complicated. The rule set for most games is going to drive a lot of how the character sheets are going to work. In fact, the majority of the rule sets actually going to be implemented in the character sheets. So we need to take this very, very seriously. We have a couple of different approaches, a couple of different things that Mythic Table does uniquely that we want to apply to how we design and work with character sheets. It's going to be a big project. It is currently not on the immediate roadmap because we're attempting to go in a little bit of a different direction. We're trying to get our content sharing up, allowing people to build their own maps, share these maps, sell these maps if they want to, rate the maps, look through a library of maps that other people have created, things like that. We really want to get that up and going so that we can interact with the partners that we have. This would be the Open Gaming Network and World Anvil. Once we get to that point, I would love it if we could sit down and really take a long, hard look at how character sheets are going to work. This is the principles that we're working so far. Number one, it has to be platform agnostic. We can't just cater to a single rule system. It has to support any kind of rule system. Number two, it has to be done in the Mythic Table way, and that is being very permissive and open, in such that it doesn't take a dungeon master to make the character sheet or special permissions. Anybody can make a character sheet. You can give permissions to other people to modify your character sheets, things like that. So this is something that Mythic Table really does well, and I want to make sure that we continue to do that kind of thing well. You think that answers the question, Sarah?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. I would also add that currently we have a pretty robust dice roller, but we currently don't support a lot of other types of random choice like cards, but that certainly isn't off the table for the future, and various things like that. So possibly that might influence certain choices. But Mark, if you wanted to mention the system that we use for rolling in case someone wants to look into what it's capable of.
Yeah, that's a really good question, or a good point. Our dice roller is, what is it? It's an open source project called Skizzers Dice Roller, I guess. It can be found on GitHub. If anyone's interested, they can jump on our Discord. We're always talking about that. You can also take a look at our code. It's mentioned in our code as well, in some of our documentation. This is an open source project that provides this randomized dice roller that's very similar to what Roll20 uses as far as its macros. Its syntax for rolling dice. It's very, very powerful. And it's an active development. They've just released a new version. I think we were at 7. I think it might be up to 9 now. So we're pretty excited about that. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions? Okay, very good. So let's see now. Going back here, I think.
Is it okay to ask questions just verbally, or is chat the preferred way?
Oh, you can ask questions verbally, absolutely.
Oh, okay. I was starting to type stuff out because I thought that was the preferred way.
No.
Thank
Not
you
at all.
for having an open house like this. I appreciate it. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to try to limit it so that I don't monopolize the time or anything to that effect. But
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
but this question is in the context of I've been following your project for a while since I first heard about it. I don't honestly actually remember where I heard about it now because it's been that long I've been following. But when you first started putting out, your developer updates and the regular mails, that's what attracted me to it because it seemed like that was being run like a software project, which honestly, that's what it is. And so I like that. And I think there's a lot of people out there that do like that because they feel like that means that you're paying attention to the details, right? So my first question is related to how you really differentiate at this stage with a lot of the other technologies that have come along that are very competitive in the same sort of structure of how they look like to the user, meaning the delivery mechanism for your service is consumed via a browser. And we have several products now that fit that style or mode of delivery, old players and new. Astral Tables, not greatly new, but it's been out there a little while, but it's kind of the new kid sort of.
Mhm.
And then we've got things like stuff that's still web tech based, but delivered via things like Steam or other game delivery content platforms. And then we've got, one of the big guys in the room that started to punch above its weight, Foundry and some others. But I'd be curious to see what you would say is key differentiating factor. I heard some wording earlier, like open source being kind of a big element and being more transparent. And that's great. I love to hear that. So I'd like you to speak on that a little bit first, if you would. And then I have a couple follow-up questions.
Sure, absolutely. Just to give you a fair warning, we're about 10 minutes left in this call. But we'll run through it really pretty quickly. And if required, let's take this chat onto Discord and we'll talk about it a little bit more. But let's see, 2 years ago, over 2 years ago is when Mythic Table was, we had the inception for Mythic Table. And when we did, we were very dissatisfied with our options out there. Foundry was very brand new, very, very brand new. Astral Empires, or Astral Empires, Astral Tabletop. They had just released and they were very new too. And what we were doing at that time was like, okay, well, how are we going to do things different? Open source nonprofit wasn't on the table for us at the time. But what we wanted to do different, and it still remains to be one of our big passions, is user experience. So we came from the game industry. User experience in the game industry is something that's been evolving over the last 15 years to the point where everything in the games that we play today are just exactly where we expect them. We go back and we play a game that's 15, 20 years old and we get kind of, this doesn't work the way I expected. It's not as smooth. And the reason that is because UX has become such a huge part of games. So we had UX designers available to us when we were putting together this idea. We talked to them about what we wanted to do, and they're like, oh, we could do this, this, and this. And yeah, there's a serious need for this. So UX is still a huge part of what we're trying to do. We have 4 designers on the project right now. Many of them have kind of gone idle, but we want to bring them back in and make UX a big cornerstone to what Mythic Table does. What was your other question, Tim?
My follow-up questions are, how do you plan on, at some point, every technology that I've ever worked with, and I've worked in IT a long time, so I've worked with a wide variety of technologies, and some have come and gone. Unfortunately, the white in my beard, so some have come and gone as a result, and there's a lot that have held on because of their longevity. But every technology stack, no matter what it is, it has the term inflection point comes to mind, but that's not the right word for it. But I'm grasping at the right word, but it's a pain point.
Mhm.
It's a limit or a hard functional limit or a problem that must be solved. And different companies and different groups handle it different ways. But it seems to me, after seeing both Astral, Foundry, and the other one is evading me right now, the name, it's not coming to me because I had too many other things going on, and I saw that you're doing an open house, and I was like, stopped everything to come join. I know I was late, but I didn't see it until I was too late. But that one also is web-based, like an electron framework based tool.
Mhm.
But all of those have the browser in common, and I feel like that's going to be your pain point at some point, because I've already hit that limit myself with Foundry, and I don't see them fixing it because there's no desire or no interest to fix it. And it's there's limits in the browser itself, and it's technology limits. It's not their fault by any
Mhm.
means, but things like that. I mean, there are technology solutions to solve that, but you've yoked your horse to, could be a star or it could be a boat anchor, depending on every given day, right? Because the browser some days is great.
Mhm.
But then some days it's like, oh, that's horrible. Why does it do that? And, you're kind of tied to the future of what that company that produces that tech, does. So I'd
Mhm.
be curious to see that part. And I can speak to that, like you said, we can take it to Discord if you want, or I don't want to take up too much time, but
Yeah. Well, let me see if I can answer that question. So Mythic tables, there's three parts to our technology. There's the DevOps and operational part, which handles security, monitoring, um, deployments, things like that. There's the server backend part, which handles our APIs, our data persistence and whatnot, our authentication. And then there's the front end presentation part. That's the browser part that everyone is familiar with. So Mythic Table is very front end heavy at this point, which means a lot of our effort goes into building that part of the component. But we're open source and our APIs are open. There's no reason why we couldn't build a secondary client. Now, if you're familiar with development and technology, you know that as soon as you start branching technologies like this, it's going to make it harder and harder to develop features. They go out of sync. Bugs will appear in this one, not this one. So we're not doing that yet. But there is a possibility that at some point in time, we're like, okay, let's make a Unity version of this. Let's make a 3D version of this. That's absolutely a possibility. And one of the things that I've really encouraged a lot of other VTT developers to do, the ones that I've spoken with, is like, well, you're interested in making the front end of this. If you're not interested in making the back end of this, you could use the Mythic table back end. And it's a great idea for people to be like, okay, let's make a VTT, but for our database or for our data solution, we can just use Mythic table. And there's nothing stopping them from doing that. That's another great thing about Mythic table. Is like we take the idea of being open source and being open, um, very, very seriously. We don't consider the other VTTs to be competition in that way. Like we use other VTTs. I use Roll20 myself. Struggle through it, but I use it. I love it. It's great. And what they've done for our hobby is fantastic. So
okay,
we
that's
don't
good.
want to replace the VTTs.
Yeah,
Right? We just want
that's
to.
understood. You're trying to find a spot within that structure of everyone around you that to coexist. It's a big industry, so I think that's That's valid, definitely. And the openness is nice. That's what originally attracted me, like to MapTool, for example. I don't know if you've used it much, but they sidled themselves with Java, and there are a bunch of guys in there that are grizzled Java veterans, and they're not going to let go of their Java stack. And that's holding them back, frankly, honestly. It's limiting their performance and a bunch of other factors. So that's why I abandoned that for Foundry, for example. I use Roll20 as well, but I can't get around some of the things it's got that are puzzling about how it does things and don't make a lot of sense. And it probably is to do with making it easier for them, but not necessarily for you and I from userland, right? You know,
Yeah.
so I like a lot of what I hear. The other one I was talking about that I couldn't remember the name was Owlbear Rodeo. Keep hearing a lot about, and I'm not used, but you know, I keep hearing about favorably comparing that to say Roll20 or Foundry or something like that. All right. Well, my final question is, I'm curious if, say, you get further into this process and you don't find that having a front and back end is not worthwhile, would you ever consider pivoting to something like a front end for some other service? So, for example, and I'm not saying to do this, I'm just saying, just as a random example, you know, Foundry is a back end and you put a front end and you do all of that user interface work that you've done and put that in front to present, and then make everything compatible with a Foundry backend. And then the Foundry instance could be hosted wherever, and, you know, even local or anything like that. But the front end would be 100% you, and all your sugar, all your candy that you're developing that stands you apart can be front and center, and you don't have to worry about the back end because somebody else is developing that.
Yeah.
Because in a way, you've kind of done that now by making the browser first and foremost and kind of like a first-class citizen, right? So
yeah, well, that's a good question. So we have a minute left, so I'll do my best to answer this. As an organization, where we've set direction and goals and things like that, that's unlikely to be one of our primary goals. However, that won't stop us from doing and supporting small little splinter groups that are interested in doing that. Another great thing about being open source is we can have a small team join the project that wants to do something like this, and we can support them and help them along through it. But as a core organization, chances are we probably won't do that, not for a significant time. Yeah.
well, thank you very much for hosting this.
Yeah,
Again,
my
I
pleasure.
really appreciate it. It's been informative and illuminating.
Cool. Well, we have like 20 seconds left, so I just want to thank everybody for coming and thank